Tonight we're going to drift slowly and gently through the whole story of Silent Hill 2. It is a quiet story and a sad one. It takes place in a small town on the shore of a lake, a town wrapped so thickly in fog that you can rarely see more than a few steps ahead. And though it is, on its surface, a horror story, underneath it is something softer and more human than that. It is a story about grief, about love and guilt, and the things we can't bring ourselves to remember. We'll move through all of it together, unhurried, from the very beginning to the very end, and we'll linger wherever we like along the way. You don't need to have played the game. You don't need to know anything about it at all. You can simply let the words carry you, like fog rolling in off still water, and you can fall asleep whenever you feel ready. The story will keep unfolding quietly in the dark, and it will still be here, whether you follow it to the end or drift off somewhere in the middle. So let yourself grow heavy and comfortable and calm, and we'll begin slowly at the edge of a foggy road, with a man and a letter, in a town that should not have been able to send it. Our story begins with a man named James Sunderland. James is an ordinary man in most ways, quiet, a little tired, the kind of man you might pass on the street without a second thought. But James is carrying something heavy inside him, a weight he has been carrying for a long time now, and it has hollowed him out in a way that doesn't show on the outside. 3 years ago, James lost his wife. Her name was Mary, and she did not go quickly. She fell ill, gravely ill, with a sickness that had no cure, and she spent her final long months confined to a hospital bed, growing weaker and thinner and further away. James sat with her through all of it. He watched the woman he loved slowly disappear, day after day, until at last she was gone, and when she died, something in James went quiet and stayed quiet for 3 long years. That is where we find him, at the start, a widower, a man moving through his days out of habit more than hope, still tangled in a grief he has never quite been able to set down. And then, one day, a letter arrives. James opens it and he recognizes the handwriting at once because it belongs to Mary, to his wife, to the woman he buried 3 years ago. The letter is short. In it, Mary tells him that she is waiting for him, that she is alone, in the quiet town of Silent Hill, in the special place that the two of them once shared. She says she is waiting there for him, and she asks him to come. Now James knows this is impossible. He knows it the way you know things in the cold light of morning. The dead do not write letters. Mary is gone, and no envelope can change that. He turns the thought over and over, and it refuses to make sense. And yet, to understand what James does next, you have to understand what Silent Hill was to the two of them. It was not a frightening place once, it was a resort town tucked against the shore of a wide, calm body of water called Toluca Lake. It was a place people came to rest and to escape and to be happy for a little while. And years ago, before the sickness, before the hospital, James and Mary came here together. They walked its streets. They stayed near the water. It was, for a time, their place. A happy memory, sealed away and kept safe. So when the letter asks him to return there, to their special place, it reaches something in James that reason can't argue with. Because a part of him, a quiet and desperate part, wants it to be true. Wants Mary to be there, waiting, more than he wants anything in the world. And so, against all sense, James goes. He drives out to Silent Hill, following roads he half remembers, until at last he reaches the edge of the town. But he cannot drive all the way in. The main road is blocked, closed off, so James leaves his car behind at a quiet rest stop on the outskirts, and he prepares to make the rest of the way on foot. Before he sets out, he stops for a moment in the small public restroom there at the edge of everything, and he stands in front of a dirty mirror and he looks at his own reflection for a long, still moment. It is a small thing, this pause, easy to miss. But it lingers, this image of a grieving man studying his own face in the glass before he walks into the fog, as though some part of him is searching for something there, some answer he cannot yet name. Then he turns and he steps outside, and he begins to walk. The path into Silent Hill is a long, narrow trail that winds down through the trees toward the town below, and as James walks it, the fog begins to thicken around him. The world grows soft and gray and silent. The sounds of birds fall away, the trees fade to shapes and then to shadows, and then to nothing at all. There is only the path beneath his feet, and the pale wall of mist ahead, and the muffled hush of a world that seems to be holding its breath. He does not know it yet, But he is not walking into the town he remembers. He is walking into something else, a place that has taken the shape of Silent Hill but that runs on different rules entirely. A place that has been waiting for him in its own way, just as surely as the letter said, waiting to show him things, to ask something of him, to lead him, step by careful step, down toward a truth he has kept buried for 3 long years. But all of that is still ahead of him, far off in the fog. For now, there is only James, and the quiet and the long gray path leading down. And so, gently, we follow him in. The first thing James notices about Silent Hill is how empty it is. He walks down out of the trees and into the streets of the town, and there is no one there. The roads are silent, the shops are dark, cars sit abandoned at the curb, their doors hanging open, as though everyone left in a great hurry a long time ago and never came back. The fog drifts through it all, thick and pale, softening every edge, so that the whole town feels less like a place and more like a memory of one, half dissolved. And it is cold, and it is still, and somewhere, far off, there is the faint sound of the wind and nothing else. James makes his way through the streets, heading toward the part of town he remembers, and before long he finds 2 small gifts that the town seems to have left waiting for him. The first is a flashlight, a small pocket light he clips to his chest, its narrow beam pushing a little way into the gray. And the second is an old pocket radio. The radio does not play music, it only makes noise. A burst of static, a harsh crackle, rising and falling on its own. And James will soon learn what that static means, because the radio is not broken. It is a warning. Whenever it hisses to life, whenever that dry crackle begins to build, it means that something is near. Something is coming through the fog toward him, and soon enough, something does. Out of the mist ahead, a shape begins to move. It is roughly the size of a person, but it is wrong in every way that matters. Its arms are bound tight against its body as though wrapped and sealed inside its own gray skin, and it lurches and staggers as it comes, and when it draws close, it lashes out, spitting a fine dark mist from within itself. This is the first of the creatures James will meet in Silent Hill, and there will be others, each one stranger and more troubling than the last. Some of them shamble, and some crawl, and some simply wait in the dark, and only stir when he draws near. There are pale, faceless things assembled from limbs that should not fit together the way they do. There are figures dressed in the white of nurses, moving wrongly through the gloom. And there are worse things still, further down, that we will come to in time. But they all share a single strange quality. They feel less like animals and more like symbols, like things that were dreamed rather than born. And that, as we will see, is very close to the truth of what they are. James defends himself, he finds a broken piece of wood and later other things, and he does what he has to do to get past the creatures that block his way. He is not a fighter, not really, he is just a frightened, grieving man trying to move through a nightmare toward the one person he came here to find. But he keeps going, deeper into the fog, deeper into the town. And now here is something worth pausing on gently as we go. The creatures of Silent Hill are not random. They are not simply monsters placed here to frighten. Every single one of them has been shaped by something. They are reflections, made solid. The town takes what is buried inside a person, the fears and the guilt and the desires they will not look at directly, and it gives those things a body and sets them loose in the fog. So the horrors that James meets are, in a very real sense, his own. He just doesn't understand that yet. He sees monsters, he does not yet see that they are wearing shapes he gave them. We'll come back to that idea again and again tonight because it is the key to the whole story. But for now, simply hold it lightly in the back of your mind, like a light left on in another room. Everything James finds in this town, he brought with him. James makes his way to a large apartment building called the Woodside Apartments because something tells him that the path forward leads through it. And as he steps inside, out of the fog and into the dim and dusty halls, the town begins, slowly, to introduce him to the other lost souls who have been drawn here. Because James, it turns out, is not entirely alone in Silent Hill. There are a few others here. A handful of people, each one wandering the same fog, each one carrying their own private weight. And over the next part of our story, James will meet them one by one. A frightened young woman with a knife, a large nervous man in a room he shouldn't be in, a little girl who runs where she likes and fears nothing at all, and a woman with a face that stops James's heart because he knows it. He knows it better than any face in the world. But we'll come to her soon. For now, James climbs the stairs of the old apartment building, his flashlight cutting its thin line through the dark, his radio quiet for the moment, and the fog pressing soft and gray against every window. And the town watches him go, patient as ever, and begins to open its doors. It is inside the quiet of the apartments that James first crosses paths with a young woman named Angela, and will spend proper time with her a little later because her story is one of the saddest in all of Silent Hill. But it is after the apartments out in a place called Rosewater Park that James meets someone who shakes him far more deeply than any monster ever could. Rosewater Park sits along the edge of the lake. It is an open, gentle place with benches and low stone walls looking out over the water. And the fog here is so thick that the lake itself is invisible, just a wall of soft gray where the world seems to end. James walks out along the park, alone, listening to the quiet lapping of water he cannot see. And there, standing near the edge, looking out at the lake, is a woman. James stops because he knows her. She has Mary's face, she has Mary's shape, Mary's voice, the exact tilt of Mary's head as she turns to look at him. For one breathless moment, James is certain, absolutely certain, that his dead wife is standing there before him, that the letter was true, that she really has been waiting for him all this time. But it isn't Mary, not quite. Her hair is a different color. Her clothes are brighter, tighter, more revealing. She carries herself with a boldness that Mary never had, a knowing, teasing warmth. And her name, she tells him, is not Mary. Her name is Maria. James can hardly speak. The resemblance is impossible, uncanny, almost cruel. And Maria seems to enjoy his confusion in a gentle sort of way. She knows she has an effect on him. When he tells her, haltingly, that she looks exactly like someone he lost, she doesn't shrink from it. She leans into it. She decides, then and there, that she will come with him. That she doesn't want to be alone in this town any more than he does. And so Maria joins James on his journey, and the two of them travel on together, deeper into the fog. Now there is something strange and unsettling about Maria, and it grows stranger the longer we sit with it. She looks like Mary, but she is everything the sick, dying Mary could not be. She is alive, she is warm, she is well. Where Mary spent her last months wasting away in a hospital bed, Maria is vibrant and healthy and full of life. Where Mary near the end could be sharp and bitter and difficult, worn down by pain, Maria is soft and adoring and endlessly forgiving of James. She is, in a sense, not the wife James lost, but the wife he wishes he still had. The fantasy version, the one without the illness and without the long, hard, complicated ending. And that should tell you something about where Maria really comes from, because remember what this town does. It takes what is buried inside a person and gives it a shape. And what James wants more than anything, more than he can bear to admit even to himself, is Mary back. Not the difficult truth of Mary, the dream of her, the comfort of her, the version that loves him simply and asks nothing hard of him in return. Maria is that wish made flesh, and the town has handed her to him, walking and talking and smiling, as if to say, here's the thing you wanted, take it. James doesn't understand this. He simply feels the pull of her, the impossible relief of seeing that beloved face alive again. And he lets her come along and he tries to protect her, and a small, guilty hope begins to grow in him that maybe somehow he can hold on to this. But Silent Hill does not offer gifts without a price, and Maria, as James will learn, is not something he can simply keep. Again and again, as their journey goes on, she will slip through his fingers in ways that make no sense. She will be lost, and found, and lost again. She will die in front of him and then be there once more, alive as though nothing had happened, with no memory of the horror he just watched. Each time it will break something in him a little further, and each time, without quite realizing it, he will be learning the same lesson, the one the whole town is trying to teach him. That you cannot bring back what is gone, no matter how badly you want it, no matter what face it wears. But that lesson is still far away. For now, James simply walks on through the fog with a dead woman's double at his side, grateful and uneasy in equal measure, and tries not to think too hard about how any of this is possible. Let's go back now, gently, to the young woman James met in the apartments. Because Angela's story deserves our full and quiet attention. James first finds Angela kneeling on the floor in a dim apartment, and she is frightened and small, and clearly deeply unwell in her heart. She is searching, she tells him, for her mother. She is looking for her family somewhere in this town, and she holds in her trembling hands a knife. She speaks of it strangely. She looks at it in a way that worries James, a way that suggests the knife is not meant for the monsters but for herself. James, kind soul that he is beneath all his own pain, gently takes the knife from her and keeps it safe, and tells her she shouldn't be thinking that way. And Angela lets him, but the sadness in her does not lift. It clings to her like the fog clings to the town. As their paths cross again through the story, the truth of Angela's life slowly comes into view, and it is a heavy one, so we will hold it with care. Angela grew up in a home without safety. Her father was a cruel man, and he hurt her, in the deepest and most unforgivable ways a parent can hurt a child. Her family did not protect her. Her mother did not save her. And Angela carried that wound alone for her whole life, until it had all but swallowed her. And so, when Angela is drawn into Silent Hill, the town reflects her pain back at her, just as it does for everyone. But Angela's Silent Hill is not quite the same as James's. When James looks around, he sees fog and gray streets and rusted halls. But there are moments when we glimpse the town as Angela sees it, and her town is on fire. The walls burn, the floors burn. Everything around her is wrapped in flame, always, endlessly. When James remarks on it once, Angela looks at him with a terrible, tired calm and tells him that for her, it is always like this. That is the whole tragedy of her in a single line. The fire never goes out. The pain is simply the air she breathes. And the town gives her pain a shape too, the same way it gives James his. It builds a monster out of the worst thing that ever happened to her, a heavy, smothering, oppressive thing that comes for her in the dark. James at one point fights it on her behalf, battles this manifestation of her suffering, and drives it back. But here is the quiet heartbreak of it. You cannot kill another person's pain for them. You can hold it back for a moment, you cannot make it gone. And Angela's pain is not James's to defeat. Their final meeting comes near the end of James's journey on a long staircase, and it is one of the most haunting scenes in the whole story. Angela is there, and around her the fire has risen higher than ever. The whole world above her is burning, and she is done. She is so very tired, and she has decided that she cannot carry any of it any further. James reaches out to her. He tries to stop her, tries to tell her there is still a way forward, that things can be different. And Angela looks at him, and gently, sadly, she sees through it. She hands his own words back to him, softened by exhaustion. She knows what waiting for her feels like, and she has decided she would rather walk into the flames than keep living inside them. And so she climbs the burning stairs, and the fire takes her, and she is gone. It is a quiet, devastating moment. There is no fight, no monster, no scare, just a person who was hurt beyond healing, walking away into the only peace she believes is left to her. And it lingers with James, because Angela is, in a way, a mirror held up beside him. She too was drawn to this town by an unbearable weight. She too is being asked whether she can find a way to keep living, or whether the pain will win. Her story is the darkest answer to that question, and it hangs over James as he goes on, a soft and terrible warning of the road he must not take. We'll let Angela rest now. She earned her rest if anyone ever did. And we'll carry her gently with us as we go. Not everyone James meets in Silent Hill is fragile or sorrowful or kind. Some of the lost souls here have gone a different way with their pain. And that is the story of a large, soft-spoken man named Eddie. James first finds Eddie in a dingy room, slumped beside a body, pale and sweating and sick. Eddie is trembling. He swears he didn't do it, that he had nothing to do with the dead man on the floor, and James, unsure and unsettled, chooses to believe him, or at least to leave him be. Eddie seems harmless, frightened, clumsy, a little pitiful. Not the kind of man you'd fear. But as their paths cross again deeper in the town, the truth of Eddie slowly rises to the surface, and it is uglier than his gentle face suggests. Eddie's wound is an old and common one. All his life, he was mocked. He was large and awkward, and people were cruel to him for it, over and over, year after year, until the cruelty had worn deep grooves into who he was. He was laughed at. He was bullied. He was made to feel small and worthless by people who thought nothing of it. And Eddie swallowed all of it, and swallowed all of it, and never let it out, until one day he couldn't swallow anymore. And when it finally came out of him, it came out as violence. By the time James meets him again, near the end, Eddie has crossed a line he can never step back over. He has begun to hurt the people who hurt him, and then people who simply remind him of them, and then, it seems, anyone at all. And the terrible thing, the thing that makes Eddie so unsettling, is that he feels no guilt about it. None. He has decided that the world was cruel to him first, and so he owes it nothing. He laughs, he rambles, he tells James that it felt good finally to stop taking it, that he's not going to apologize to anyone ever again. Here's why Eddie matters so much to the shape of our story. Silent Hill is a town that reflects guilt. It draws in people who have done terrible things or had terrible things done to them, and it holds up a mirror. And what we see in the people James meets are all the different ways a person can answer that mirror. Angela answers it by turning her pain inward until it consumes her, and Eddie answers it the opposite way. He turns his pain outward and refuses to feel a shred of remorse and lets it make a monster of him. Neither of them can face what happened to them honestly. Neither of them can carry it and still stay whole. And James is somewhere between them, still undecided, still circling the truth of his own guilt without landing on it. Angela and Eddie are the two cliffs on either side of the path he's walking. One of them fell inward, the other fell outward. And the town is quietly asking James which way he will fall or whether he can somehow keep his footing where they could not. James and Eddie's final meeting takes place in a cold, strange place deep beneath the town, and it does not end gently. Eddie, lost now to his own rage, turns on James, and James is forced to defend himself, and when it is over, Eddie is dead. It is not a triumphant moment. It is grim and sad and a little sickening. James has taken a life here with his own hands, and that act sits heavily on him, another stone added to a load he is already struggling to carry. Because James, though he doesn't yet fully know it, is no stranger to what he has just done. But that truth is still waiting for him, a little further down. For now, he leaves Eddie behind in the cold and moves on, quieter and heavier than before, deeper into a town that keeps asking him the same question he cannot yet answer. Amid all the fog and the monsters and the sorrow, there is one bright and stubborn thread running through Silent Hill, and her name is Laura. Laura is a little girl, no more than 8 years old, and she is unlike anyone else James meets in the town. Because Laura is not afraid. She runs through the streets and the buildings as though they were an ordinary playground. She teases James. She plays tricks on him, locks doors behind her, darts away laughing, leads him on little chases through the halls. She is mischievous and quick and entirely, wonderfully unbothered by the nightmare all around her. And there is a reason for that, a beautiful and important reason that sits right at the heart of what Silent Hill is. Laura does not see the monsters. For James, the town is full of horror, full of twisted creatures and rusted darkness and dread. But for Laura, none of that exists. She walks the same halls he walks, and she sees only empty rooms and quiet corridors. The fog is just fog to her. The creatures simply aren't there, because Laura is a child, and she is innocent. She carries no guilt, no buried shame, no terrible secret gnawing at her from the inside. And so the town has nothing to reflect back at her. Silent Hill can only build its horrors out of what a person brings with them, and Laura has brought nothing dark at all. She is untouched, and so to her the town is harmless, and she moves through it as freely as a child moves through a summer afternoon. That single fact tells you almost everything about how this town works. It is not haunted in the ordinary sense. It is a mirror, and a mirror shows you nothing if you stand before it clean. The horror was never in the walls. It was always in the people who walked among them, and a child with a clear heart proves it simply by being unafraid. But Laura is not only here to show us that, she is here because of Mary. Because Laura knew Mary. In the last stretch of Mary's illness in the hospital where Mary lay dying, the two of them met, and they became close. Mary, gentle even at the end, grew fond of the little orphaned girl who visited her room. And Laura came to love Mary dearly in return, the way a lonely child loves someone who is kind to them. Mary even wrote to Laura and thought of her, and hoped for her. And so Laura came to Silent Hill for the same reason James did. She is looking for Mary. She believes Mary is here somewhere and she wants to find her, and she cannot understand why the sad, slow man following her around seems so unwilling to help. This is where Laura becomes something sharper than comic relief. Because Laura knew the real Mary, the true Mary, in a way that cuts straight through James's careful story. and she is angry at James. She blames him in her fierce and simple way for something to do with Mary's suffering. She lashes out at him. She calls him a liar. And James, who is still holding his own version of events together with trembling hands, cannot quite meet her accusations head on. Through Laura, we get our first clear glimpse of a Mary who was real and complicated and whose ending was not as simple as James has let himself believe. Laura carries a piece of the truth around with her without even knowing it, and every time she flings it at James, it lands a little closer to the thing he has buried. She matters too for what comes after the story ends, because in the gentlest of the possible endings, it is Laura that James walks out of Silent Hill beside. A grieving man and a parentless child, both of whom loved the same woman, leaving that terrible place together, each giving the other a reason to keep going. In the darkness of this story, Laura is the small, warm possibility of a life afterward, of grief becoming in time something a person can live with. So we hold on to Laura as we go. She is the light left on in the window, and we'll be glad of her before the end. And now we come to him, the figure that looms over all of Silent Hill 2, the one shape from this story that the whole world remembers, the one they call Pyramid Head. He is a tall, powerful figure, roughly the shape of a man, but his head is hidden entirely beneath a great heavy helmet of rusted metal, shaped like a pyramid, with no face and no eyes to be seen. He drags behind him an enormous blade, a sword so long and so heavy that its tip scrapes and screeches along the ground as he walks, and the sound of it is one you do not forget. He moves slowly, relentlessly, without hurry and without mercy, and wherever he appears, dread comes with him. James first sees him from a distance behind bars, standing motionless in the gloom, watching, and later he sees him do terrible things, witnesses this executioner set upon other creatures in the dark, while James hides, frozen, unable to look away. Pyramid Head does not speak. He does not explain himself. He simply appears again and again at the edges of James's journey, an ever-present threat hunting him through the fog. And for a long time, James has no idea what this thing is, or why it is following him. But we, sitting here in the quiet, can understand him, because Pyramid Head, like everything else in this town, is a reflection. He was not sent by some outside evil. He was made by James out of the deepest currents running through James's own heart. And what Pyramid Head is made of, above all, is guilt, and the terrible need to be punished for it. Somewhere inside himself, beneath all the fog of forgetting, James knows he has done something unforgivable. And a part of him longs, desperately, to be held accountable for it, to be judged, to be made to suffer for it, the way he believes he deserves. James cannot bring himself to face that guilt directly, so instead, his mind builds an executioner, a faceless figure of pure judgment and punishment, who follows him everywhere, blade dragging, waiting to deliver the sentence James secretly believes he has earned. The town takes that need, and it gives it this shape, the pyramid-headed executioner, drawn, it said, from the old dark history of Silent Hill itself, from the ceremonies and the punishments of its past, dressed in the iconography of an ancient executioner. James's guilt reached into the town's memory and pulled out the perfect form to torment him with. A judge, a punisher, a living verdict hunting him down. There is a darker layer to Pyramid Head too, a strand of violence and desire tangled up in James that the figure also expresses. The parts of James's grief that curdled into something ugly and ashamed. He is not a simple monster, he is everything James cannot look at, wearing armor. And this is why, near the very end of the story, there is a moment of quiet, strange release. Because when James finally begins to face the truth of what he did, when he finally stops running from it and lets himself know it, there is no more need for the executioner. The whole purpose of Pyramid Head was to punish a man who would not admit his crime. Once James admits it, once he takes the weight onto himself and stops hiding, the figure has nothing left to do. In that final moment, there are two of them, two executioners, and they turn their great blades not on James, but on themselves. They lay down and they end, because James no longer needs them. He has begun at last to judge himself, and so the judges he built can rest. It is a remarkable idea when you sit with it. The most frightening figure in the entire story turns out to be, in the end, a thing James made because a part of him wanted to be punished, and it can only be dismissed when James is finally ready to face what he did. The monster was never really the enemy. It was James's own conscience, given a body and a blade, following him through the fog, waiting for him to be honest. But we are getting close now to that honesty, and before we reach it, we should spend a little time understanding the town itself, the strange and sorrowful place that has been shaping all of this from the beginning. We have talked again and again about what this town does, how it takes what is inside a person and gives it a shape. Now let's sit for a while with the town itself, and with the deep old strangeness of Silent Hill. Silent Hill was not always a place of fog and monsters. On the surface, in the ordinary world, it is a small American resort town on the shore of Toluca Lake. People came here on holiday, they boated on the water and stayed in the lakeside hotels and walked the quiet streets. It was, for most of its life, an unremarkable and pleasant little place. But underneath that pleasant surface, Silent Hill has always carried a darkness. There is something in the ground here, in the water, in the history of the place. Long ago, it was a site of old rituals and old beliefs, a place people thought of as sacred, or cursed, or both. There were ceremonies here, there was a prison out on the lake, and executions and cruelty. There was a great fire that burned underground for years. Sorrow and violence soaked into the land, layer by layer over a very long time. And somewhere along the way, the town became something more than a town. It became a kind of listening thing, a place with a will of its own. At the center of it all sits the lake, Toluca Lake, wide and gray and always half hidden in mist. The town grew up around it, and the town's darkness seems to gather there, in the still water. Over the years, people drowned in that lake, bodies were lost beneath it. It became, in the town's long memory, a place where the dead go down and do not always stay down. When the fog is thick, the lake becomes a wall of nothing at the edge of the world, a soft, gray blankness you could walk straight into without knowing. And more than one story in Silent Hill ends at the water. James's own story, in some tellings, ends there too. The lake is patient, the way the whole town is patient. It simply waits and holds what is given to it, and what Silent Hill does, with that will, is call to people. Not everyone. It calls to certain people. People who are carrying something, a guilt they cannot put down, a grief that has twisted into something heavier, a wound that will not close. The town reaches out somehow across whatever distance, and it draws these people in. And when they arrive, it wraps them in fog, and it seals them off from the ordinary world. And it begins its work. That work is to reflect. The town reads what is buried deepest in a person, and it builds a private world around them out of it. The monsters, the rusted corridors, the burning stairs, the executioner with his blade, all of it is drawn from the person it surrounds. Two people can walk the same hallway and see two completely different places, because each of them is really walking through the landscape of their own hidden heart. For Angela, the town is a world on fire. For Eddie, it is a place that finally lets his rage run free. For Laura, the innocent child, it is nothing frightening at all, just empty rooms and quiet fog. And for James, it is a slow and elaborate machine built for one purpose: to lead him gently and terribly toward the truth he came here carrying. Because that is the thing about Silent Hill. It is cruel, yes, it is frightening, but it is not in the end without meaning. It does not torment people at random, it confronts them. It holds up the mirror they have spent their whole lives refusing to look into, and it says, "Here. Look, this is what you are carrying. What will you do with it now?" Some people, like Angela, look and cannot bear what they see and are destroyed. Some, like Eddie, look and refuse it and become monsters. And some perhaps can look and take the weight of it honestly and find, on the far side, something like peace. The town does not decide which. It only sets the mirror in front of them. What they do with their reflection is up to them. And this is why the letter that started everything makes a strange kind of sense. Mary did not write it. Mary is dead. But something reached into James's grief, into his desperate, buried longing, and it called to him in the one voice he could never ignore. The voice of the wife he lost. It knew exactly what would draw him in. And it was right. So James walks through a Silent Hill that was made for him. Every horror is his. Every locked door and every twisted creature is a piece of his own hidden self, arranged into a path. And that path leads down, always down, through the apartments and the hospital and the prison and the labyrinth beneath, toward a small hotel room by the lake where the truth has been waiting for him, patiently, for 3 long years. Let's follow him down. As James goes deeper into Silent Hill, the town begins to change around him. In the early parts of his journey, the horror is soft-edged, hidden in fog, but the further down he goes, the more the fog gives way to something worse. The gentle gray world peels back at times into what people call the other world. The walls turn to rust and grated metal. The floors become iron mesh with darkness yawning below. Blood and decay creep into everything. The comfortable disguise of the ordinary town falls away, and underneath it is something raw and industrial and cruel. This is Silent Hill with its mask off. The nearer James draws to the truth, the less the town bothers to pretend. His path takes him through a great hospital called Brookhaven, and this is a heavy place for James, though he doesn't say why. The halls are lined with beds and wheelchairs and the quiet machinery of the sick. Strange nurses move through the dark, their bodies twisted, their faces wrong. And a hospital, of course, is where James spent the worst days of his life, sitting beside Mary as she faded. The town knows this. It brings him here on purpose and lets the grief of those days seep up through the floors. And the creatures that haunt this hospital are shaped by those days as surely as everything else in the town. The figures here take the form of nurses, drawn from James's memories of the women who tended to Mary in her final months, but twisted now, made strange and violent and unsettling. And there is something more uncomfortable folded into their shape, something James would never say aloud. For all those long months at Mary's bedside, James was a man whose wife was being taken from him a little more each day, present in body but slipping further and further out of reach. He was lonely in a way he was deeply ashamed of, starved of warmth and of tenderness and of the ordinary closeness of the woman he loved. And buried in his grief were ordinary human longings that he felt monstrous for feeling at all, at such a time, in such a place. The town, which hides nothing, took that shame and gave it a body. The nurses and the strange, faceless mannequin things James meets in the dark, assembled from pieces of the female form, are the shape of a desire he could not forgive himself for even having, tangled now with the sorrow of the very place where he felt it. For years he pushed all of that down and locked it away with everything else. Silent Hill simply lets it walk the halls out in the open where he cannot look away. None of this is comfortable, and it isn't meant to be. It is the town doing what it always does, refusing to let James keep any part of himself hidden. His grief is here, his guilt is here, and so too are the small, human, shameful things he never forgave himself for, all of it given a body, all of it set loose in the fog, so that James must walk past it and see it, whether he wishes to or not. It is here and in the places beyond that the strangeness of Maria deepens into something almost unbearable, because Maria keeps dying. At the hospital, James loses her. She is taken from him, killed before his eyes by the executioner's blade, and James is left shattered, grieving her all over again as though she were Mary herself. But then later, further down, there she is again, alive, whole, smiling, with no memory of having died at all, puzzled that he seems so shaken. And James clings to her, and hope flares in him again, and then, before long, she is lost once more. Over and over this happens. Maria is taken and returns and is taken again. And each time, James is forced to watch the face of his dead wife die in front of him, and each time the town brings her back, only to tear her away once more. It is a kind of torment designed with terrible precision, because it is teaching him in the cruelest possible way the one thing he refuses to accept. That he cannot keep her, that no matter how many times she seems to come back, she will always be lost again. That is simply the nature of what she is. Deeper still, James descends into a place out on the water, an old prison called Toluca Prison, grim and cold with its cells and its cruelties and its long history of punishment. And below even that, a vast and shifting labyrinth, a maze of tunnels and rooms and impossible spaces, the deepest and most tangled layer of the town, and of James's own mind. The further he goes, the less the journey resembles a place at all, and the more it resembles the inside of a man working his way down through his own memory, toward the single moment he has locked away at the very bottom. Down here in the labyrinth, James finds unsettling messages, left as if for him, notes that seem to know him. One speaks of a prison of his own making, another speaks of a river of memories leading to his own private hell. The town is no longer hinting, It is beginning to say the truth aloud in words scratched on walls, daring James to understand them. And Maria appears once more, down here, changed, behind bars now, calling to him, sometimes tender, sometimes cruel. She speaks with Mary's voice, but says things Mary never would, taunting him, pleading with him, blurring the line between the two women until James can hardly tell where his memory ends and his longing begins. He is very close now, close to the bottom, close to the room by the lake where it all began and ended 3 years ago. James climbs at last out of the labyrinth and toward the place the whole town has been steering him, the place the letter named from the very start, their special place, a quiet hotel on the shore of Toluca Lake called the Lakeview Hotel, where he and Mary once stayed together in the good days before everything. And it is there in a small room on an upper floor that Silent Hill will finally show James the thing he came here to remember. Let's go with him gently into that room. The Lakeview Hotel is quiet and faded and full of ghosts of a happier time. James walks its halls, and everywhere there are echoes of the visit he and Mary once made here, back when she was well, back when they were simply two people in love on a holiday by the lake. The hotel remembers them, and as James moves through it, the careful story he has told himself for 3 years begins, finally, to come apart. He comes to understand that he stayed in a particular room here on his last visit, room 312, and that he left something behind in that room, something the hotel has kept and set aside and been waiting to return to him. A videotape. James finds the tape and he finds a way to watch it, and he sits down in front of the flickering screen. And the town falls silent, because this is the moment everything has been leading toward. This is the bottom of the labyrinth. This is the thing behind every locked door and every twisted monster and the faceless executioner with his dragging blade. This is what James buried. The tape shows the two of them, James and Mary, here in this hotel in happier days. And then it shows the truth of how those days ended. Because Mary's illness, we learn, was long and it was terrible. It did not only take her body. Near the end, it took pieces of who she was. The pain and the fear and the slow ruin of her turned her, at times, bitter and cruel. She lashed out at James, the one person still there, the one within reach. She told him she wanted to die, and then that she didn't, and then she raged at him, and then she begged him not to leave her, all in the same breath. And James, who loved her, sat in that hospital room month after month, watching the woman he adored disappear into her suffering, feeling his own life drain away alongside hers, feeling love and grief and exhaustion, and buried underneath it all, a terrible, shameful resentment he could not admit to. And on the tape, at the very end, James sees what he did. He killed her. With his own hands, in that hospital room, James ended Mary's life. He took a pillow and he smothered her, and he held it there until she was gone. Why he did it is the hardest and most human question in the whole story, and the game does not give a single clean answer because there isn't one. Part of it was mercy. She was in agony with no hope of recovery, and she had told him she wanted release. Part of it was love, unable to watch her suffer another day. But part of it, and this is the part James could not live with, was something darker. Exhaustion, resentment, a desperate, buried wish to have his own life back, to be free of the years of dying. He killed her out of compassion and out of selfishness, tangled so tightly together that they could never be pulled apart. And that, more than the act itself, is what broke him, because a man who kills purely out of mercy might, in time, forgive himself, and a man who kills purely out of cruelty is simply a monster. But James was both at once and neither cleanly, and he could not bear to be that, so he did the only thing his mind could do to survive it. He forgot. He buried the memory so deep that it vanished. He rebuilt the story of his life around a gentler lie, that Mary had simply died of her illness 3 years ago, and that he had grieved her honestly ever since. He erased his own hand from her death. And he believed it. He truly believed it, right up until a letter arrived in his wife's handwriting, calling him back to the place where the truth was waiting. That is what Silent Hill has been doing to him this entire time. Everything, all of it, was built to bring him back to this. The monsters made of his shame. The executioner made of his need for punishment. Maria made of his longing, dying and dying again to teach him he could not keep what he had destroyed. The town called him here and wrapped him in fog and led him down through his own guilt, layer by layer, all the way to a small room and a videotape and the thing he did with his own 2 hands. and now he knows. Now at last, James Sunderland remembers what he came here to remember. There is one more thing waiting for him. As his journey nears its end, James finds Mary's true letter, not the impossible one that called him here, but her real last words, written to him before she died, in her own hand. And in it, the real Mary speaks, not the monster of her final illness, and not the fantasy of Maria, but the whole and genuine woman who loved him. She tells him that she knows how hard it was. She thanks him for the years they had. She tells him she wanted him to have a happy life even without her. She forgives him, and she asks him gently to go on living. It is the kindest thing in the entire story, and it is the thing James has been unable to give himself for 3 years. Forgiveness. Whether he can finally accept it from her is the question the whole game leaves in his hands. And in ours, Silent Hill 2 does not end just one way. The town has led James to the truth, and now it steps back, and it lets the answer depend on James himself, on the state of his heart, on what, after everything, he has become. And so there are several different endings, each one a different answer to the same quiet question. Now that you know what you did, what will you do with the rest of your life? We'll walk through them softly, one by one. In the ending many people hold closest, the one simply called Leave, James finds his way through to forgiveness. He accepts the truth of what he did, and he accepts Mary's grace, her wish that he go on living. And he walks out of Silent Hill alive and freed, not of the memory, but of the endless punishment he was inflicting on himself. And he does not walk out alone. Little Laura goes with him, the grieving man and the orphaned child, the two who loved Mary most, leaving that place of fog together to try to build some kind of life on the other side. It is not a happy ending, exactly, but it is a hopeful one. It says that even the heaviest guilt can perhaps be carried and survived, that a person can do a terrible thing and face it honestly and still find their way toward the light. In another ending, the saddest of them all, called In Water, James cannot forgive himself. The weight of it is simply too much. Having finally faced what he did, he decides that he cannot live carrying it, and he chooses to follow Mary into the still, gray water of the lake so that the two of them can be together in whatever lies beyond. It is a gentle, terrible ending, quiet and final, and it carries one last revelation that reframes the whole journey, because it becomes clear that Mary's body has been with James all along. He brought her here himself, in his car, from the very beginning. In some sense, he did not come to Silent Hill to find her. He came to bring her home, and to decide at the water's edge whether he could go on without her. In this ending, he decides that he cannot. In a third ending, the one called Maria, James makes a different choice and a sadder one than it first appears. He turns away from the truth, and he clings, instead, to the fantasy. He leaves Silent Hill not with Laura and not through the water, but with Maria at his side, the living dream of the wife he lost. On the surface, it looks like he has won, like he has gotten the impossible thing he wanted, Mary back again. But as they leave, Maria coughs, a small, dry cough, the very first sign of the very same illness that took Mary from him. And in that tiny sound is the whole horror of this ending, because it means James has learned nothing. He has refused to face his guilt, and so he is doomed to live it all over again. The sickness, the long dying, and one day, the same unbearable choice. The town offered him a mirror, and he closed his eyes, and so he is condemned to repeat the very thing he came here carrying. And there is a fourth ending, stranger and darker still, called Rebirth. In this one, James is consumed not by grief or by fantasy, but by a desperate refusal to accept death at all. He turns to the old dark powers of Silent Hill, to the town's buried rituals, and he sets out onto the lake believing he can use them to bring Mary back from the dead. It is the ending of a man who has looked at the truth and answered it with obsession, willing to reach for forbidden and terrible things rather than let his wife stay gone. Where it leads, the game does not show us, but nothing good, we sense, waits at the end of that particular hope. Those are the heart of it. Forgiveness and a new life. Despair and the water. Fantasy and the endless repeating of the wound, or obsession reaching past death itself. 4 different souls that James might turn out to be. 4 different answers to what a person does when they finally face the worst thing they've ever done. There are, it should be said, a couple of other endings too, hidden ones, that the creators tucked away as a kind of gentle joke, a release valve for such a heavy story. In one, it is revealed, absurdly, that a small dog has been behind everything in the town all along, pulling levers at a control panel, and James collapses in relief and disbelief. In another, aliens and a flying saucer arrive, and the whole thing tips over into silliness. These endings are not meant to be taken as true. They are a little wink from the storytellers, a moment of light after so much darkness, a reminder that it is, after all, only a story, and you are allowed to smile. And the newer version of the game added a couple more quiet endings of its own, further shades of the same central choice between letting go and holding on. But the true weight of Silent Hill 2 lives in those first endings. And which one is real? Which one truly happened? The game refuses to say. There is no official answer. It is left deliberately open. Because the point was never to tell you what James chose. The point was to ask what a person could choose when brought face to face with the thing they cannot forgive in themselves. So what remains when the fog finally clears? On its surface, Silent Hill 2 is a horror story. Monsters in the mist, a faceless executioner, a haunted and cursed town. But we have seen tonight that almost none of the horror in it comes from outside. It comes from within. Every creature is a piece of someone's hidden heart. Every locked door leads deeper into a person, not a place. The real haunting was never supernatural. It was the ordinary human weight that people carry and cannot set down. Grief, guilt, shame, the things we do to the people we love and cannot forgive ourselves for. That is why this story has stayed with people for so long, and why it is remembered so tenderly, even though it is dark. Because underneath the fog, it is about something everyone understands. The way loss can twist us, the way we hide from our worst memories and build careful lies to live inside, and how those buried things do not disappear, but wait and grow heavier, until one day something calls us back to face them. James's journey through Silent Hill is really the journey of a person trying to forgive himself, trying to look at the worst thing he ever did and find a way to keep living anyway. And the town, for all its cruelty, gives him that chance. It refuses to let him keep pretending. It strips away the comfortable lie and shows him the truth, and then it asks him, gently and terribly, what he will do now that he knows. Angela could not survive her truth and walked into the fire. Eddie refused his and let it turn him monstrous. But James, in the kindest version of his story, does something rarer and braver. He looks at the very worst of himself, and he lets himself be forgiven, and he walks out of the fog with a child's hand in his, toward a life he is finally willing to live. And Mary, in the end, is the quiet heart of all of it, not the monster of her illness, and not the fantasy of Maria, but the real woman, who loved James and who, even from beyond her own death, wanted only for him to be at peace. Her last letter is the gentlest thing in this whole sorrowful story. She forgives him, she thanks him, she tells him to go on and be happy. She gives him the very thing he could not give himself, and whether he can accept it is the question the story leaves resting softly in the dark. That is Silent Hill 2, a ghost story with no real ghosts, a monster story where the monsters are made of love gone wrong. A journey down through the fog of a grieving man's own heart, to the truth waiting at the bottom, and back up again, if he is lucky, into forgiveness. And now the fog is settling. The town is growing quiet. The lake is still and gray and calm, and there is nothing left in it to fear. There is nothing more you need to think about tonight. No door left to open, no path left to walk. The story is told and it is at rest, and so may you be. So let the town fade now, gently, back into its fog. Let James walk on into whatever peace he found, and let yourself grow heavy and warm and still, and drift down softly into sleep. Rest well.